She'll be okay, Calic.
I shot him a curious look. His eyes weren't even open. How had he known what I was doing? Doesn't stop me from worrying. He opened his eyes at last, and I could tell he was contemplating my words, not trying for some glib response.
True. It never stopped me from worrying about you when you were in training.
I took care of myself.
And yet...
When we met again after my training, I never would have guessed you'd thought of me at all during that time.
It never made sense to show you. What with me being Unseelie, wasn't like we could make it work.
I know. And yet...
Knowing we were destined to be on opposite sides of the river was almost worse than being from Lou's line and having Unseelie powers.
A punch to the gut I never recovered from. He splashed water over his face, disappearing from view as he dunked underneath to wet his hair. Oh, to be a fish in that water. When he came up again, his hair was sleek and wet.
Something always drew me to you, Orphan. This bond the Oracle speaks of, perhaps. I'm not sure. Even as a child, I just wanted to be near to you. To make sure that orphanage didn't eat you whole. It was nothing romantic for a long time, but I always hated to be away from you.
I hated watching you leave after a visit. Because before my teen crush on Phelan, I just plain old missed him in between visits. He'd been my friend. I wonder why our magic didn't play up then.
We were just children. Or maybe Underhill was still operational back then. Maybe the fake came later once I'd gone to the Unseelie court. Then you left for training.
Guess so. He rinsed off, dunking again, and ran his hands through his wet strands as I watched his arm muscles tense with the action. Yeah, I wasn't looking away anytime soon. What are those marks on your arms and legs from? Phelan stilled, just for a second, before leaning back in the tub again. His dark eyes roamed my face before I saw the buried color in them rise to the surface again.
My mother tried to train the Unseelie out of me, using iron.
I didn't voice my horror, just absorbed it and let it fuel the mounting and furious anger I felt against Lan's pathetic parents. They would answer for what they'd done one day. You're no less because you're Unseelie. I wish I could convince you of it.
I know. And yet...
There it was again. Some things had to be learned on your own timeline. Hadn't he said something similar to me about worth? But I could no more take his word for it than he could take mine. What your parents did was wrong, Phelan. Your mother is no hero, and that's why she didn't recognize the hero in you. He shook his head.
I am no hero. My grandfather's spear does not light up at my touch.
The fiery spear of Lou was a legendary weapon, and one I'd often gazed upon because Phelan's mother was never seen without it. And when did you last touch it?
When I was 16, just before I was tested.
About the same time you stopped visiting me.
Now you know why.
I did. It was funny how many parallels ran between us, really. Magical, situational, emotional. Nerves erupted low in my stomach. I do. But Lan, you know that we choose our own families, right? Like I chose Synth. You don't have to be who they limit you to be. Carve your own likeness.
Tell you what, I'll give it a go if you will.
I stared at the journal in my hands. Synth still hadn't written back. I squared my shoulders and looked at him again. Deal.
Good. Now, unless you want to get hot and bothered again, I suggest you look elsewhere.
My lips curved as I continued to look at him, and a slow grin started across his face in response.
Hot and bothered it is.